So, now as musicians and songwriters, I think we all know about the importance of harmony in our music, or the way that we organize our chord progressions in songs, or the way that we harmonize a vocal line or a melody line of some sort. Now, I think a few months back I made a video that goes pretty in depth with diatonic harmony and discussing where chords come from out of scales. But now I wanted to discuss a different kind of concept for people who are already used to making chords with diatonic progressions but feel kind of stuck with them. Where you're making a lot of chord progressions that fit within a scale, but you feel like you're using a lot of the same ones because, of course, there's certain chords within the major scale that we like to lean towards over others. And the thing about harmony that I've started to learn over time is that you could really get away with a lot. You can get away with a lot of really outside kind of spicy chords, or even just throwing in a chord that's completely outside the scale altogether. And I think that's kind of helps spice up your playing, as well as kind of introduce you to more complex kind of emotional qualities that you can add into your music. So specifically today, I wanted to discuss the topic of parallel harmony. Now, I chose this topic because I've noticed that it's actually been getting pretty popular to use amongst the recent prog scene, the progressive rock, progressive metal kind of fusion-y kind of scene. And if you don't know what parallel harmony is, basically it refers to, if you've ever taken a music theory course, I know you know what parallel fifths are, because every music teacher tells you not to use parallel fifths ever as far as four-part vocal writing. Of course you can use parallel fifths wherever the hell you want, but in four-part writing, don't use them. But if you remember that and what parallel fifths are, you remember that a parallel fifth is basically if you have a line, like if we start in F, and a fifth above that would be C. Now a parallel fifth is if in the vocal melody the F went to G, and then the C went to D. That would be parallel fifths, because you're basically just taking this shape and moving it up. Parallel harmony basically means when two parts are moving up or down and maintaining that same interval between them. So really, parallel harmony just refers to if you have a line, say you have a line that goes like this, just walks up the scale, you can kind of spice it up by adding a note against it that goes up, but maintaining the same interval between them. In that case, that would be major parallel thirds. That idea of just taking a melodic idea and just playing the same exact thing a third above is really common in metal, especially Iron Maiden pretty much became famous for doing that. Now, how does that pertain to chord progressions? Well, on guitar, what's really cool about guitar is it's actually really easy to play chords in parallel harmony to each other. Now, one thing you can do to get cool chord progression ideas is to just take one chord shape, just take it like a major 7 shape, and see how it sounds when you just move that around. It gets you some very outside sounds because you're no longer sticking to a scale, especially if you're not doing it diatonically and you just go through different areas of the neck without really thinking about it. You get some really interesting ideas, and it kind of helps you start breaking out of the usual chord progressions that you use. Like I said before, it's really common in the prog scene. Like if you've ever heard like Pliny, a lot of his songs use it. Like I forget what it's called, but an older song went something like this. If you notice, that's pretty much just all built on the same chord shape. In this case, it's this minor add 9 kind of shape. So this starts on A flat, minor add 9, and then goes to B, minor add 9, back to A flat, and then it does the little encircling thing. But it's all just the same exact chord shape, and all of the notes are moving parallel to each other into each chord. Even the local scene here in California, I like to go see a lot of the local prog bands around here, of course, because I'm also a prog musician, so I want to check out everyone who's around here as well. And our good friends in Shaw Nova, actually, I notice in a lot of their songs, they like to use this concept a lot as well, especially in the song Eternal Bonds. Now, if you listen to that main part, the chords are this kind of minor 9 shape with that omits the third, something like that. And pretty much all they're doing is just taking that and just moving it up a whole step. And that alone actually makes a pretty cool chord progression. Like, it's actually really fun to solo over. And that's another thing. You might be wondering, how in the world am I supposed to like solo, or how am I supposed to write other parts over this if they're not sticking in one scale? Now, another interesting thing that learning how to play jazz and learning how to play like kind of more fusion-y stuff has taught me is that you could pretty much get away with any kind of scale as long as the chord that you're playing behind it fits within that scale. That's kind of what makes the harmony work. For example, when I look down at this shape, I'm looking at it and I can see, oh, well, it fits really nicely into this A minor box. Or I could even play Dorian over it because they're not playing specifically the 13 or the flat 13. So you can think of that as A Dorian. Now when it moves up to here, that's no longer going to work. You're going to have to switch into something else. So in this case, for this change, since you're just moving that up, I'm going to literally just shift the scale up. So I could play B minor or B Dorian over that as well. Or in this case, they're actually not playing the third, so you probably could get away with playing a Mixolydian as well. So at first you might run into the trouble of, oh, well, that's a really fast chord change, and all of a sudden I have to go into this other scale, so like it might feel kind of awkward to you. So what I did at first to kind of get used to this concept is when it switched to another chord, I would think of this A. I would basically think of like the closest relative mode that starts with this note, basically. So in this case, we're starting in A minor. And then when it goes to B minor, now if you play the B minor scale starting on A, you get A Mixolydian. So in a way, I'm just thinking about going from A minor to A Mixolydian. Except, of course, you're playing over a B chord. But that just helps you get into that general idea of the shape. And also what's interesting is when you start looking at the difference between the two scales, like what notes change specifically. In this case, we have A minor going to this. Now only two notes change between those. In this case, it goes, this C turns to a C sharp, and this F turns into an F sharp. And that's the only difference between those two scales, is now you can get some cool chromatic lines going into each change that sound something like this. And that's really the beauty of starting to get into these kind of more complex concepts with chords that go outside of scale, is now you could start coming up with completely different melodic lines that you never came up with before. So I just wanted to show you all that topic really quickly because it's one thing that really started getting me thinking about other ways to get different sounds out of my chord progressions rather than just sticking to diatonic chord progressions, which of course I still write lots of music with completely diatonic chord progressions. There's nothing wrong with it. If you're trying to convey that specific emotion that comes with those kind of chord progressions, then they work perfectly. But of course, I'm also a weird jazz, fusion, progressive, rock, metal guy, I guess. So I like experimenting and coming up with new ideas that are completely different. Parallel harmony is just one way that I started diving into that concept and started realizing, wow, I could really get away with a lot of different things. Like even if I just went like, literally just take it to random places. Of course, some places work better than others, but pretty much if you want to come up with ideas over that, you could just stick to those scales that they come in and come up with kind of odd melodic ideas that you wouldn't come up with normally. But that is about it for me. So hopefully this kind of helps spark some ideas out of you and kind of inspires you to think outside of the box and come up with some cool new ideas for your own music. But anyway, that's my quick tip of the day. I will catch you all in the next video. I'll see ya.